Hello everyone! Some of you may have heard the big news, some of you may have not, but Vladimir Kramnik announced that he is retiring from professional chess. He said that he made the decision a few months back, but now Tata Steel has officially been his last, professional tournament. He will of course stay in the chess world. He will use his great influence and knowledge to, pass the knowledge on. I'm sure he will coach kids, be part of organizations that promote chess, and do what he can to, be included in every possible way in chess other than playing professionally, such as, for example, like Garry Kasparov. He's still extremely active in promoting chess, but like I said, as for playing, he will no longer be playing. So a lot of you said we should show a nice game as in honor of Big Vlad. So it wasn't an easy decision which game to show. It had to be against someone very strong, against someone in his prime. So I thought, which better game than a game against none other than world champion Garry Kasparov. This is a game from 1996. It was played in Dos Hermanas in Spain, and it was a tournament that featured 10 of the strongest players in the world. We're going to talk about the results of the tournament after I show you the game, but it's really a beautiful game, really an explosive game. It's like Kasparov is playing against Kasparov, but it's... People do say that prior to Kramnik's match with Kasparov for the World Chess Championship, Kramnik's style was a bit different. In order to overcome such a challenge and to defeat Garry Kasparov, Kramnik had to become what he is today, the positional machine. But in those days, anything could happen. So let's see what happened in one such game as this one. D4 by Kasparov, we have D5, C4, and we have C6. The game was played in 1996. I don't know if I mentioned that. Knight to c3, we have knight to f6, knight to f3, and e6. So the Semi-Slav defense is on the board. E3 by Kasparov, knight b to d7, we have bishop to d3, and only now that the bishop has been developed, does Kramnik capture on c4, forcing bishop to waste a few tempi. We have bishop captures on c4, b5, bishop goes back. This was all standard theory at the time, and it still is today. Bishop to b7, developing the light square bishop, and as long as black can at some point play c5, as the knight and bishop are very nicely controlling c5, the light square bishop on b7 will come alive. This rook can come into the game via c8, or perhaps if the queen moves to d8. So all is well for black at the moment. Kasparov castles, and we have a6 here. Strengthening the b5 pawn, and so c5 is the plan. We have e4 by Kasparov, and now e5 is a pretty big positional threat. For example, if you play a slow move like rook c8, e5 is definitely coming, and after knight d5, knight captures, c captures, and then after, let's say, a4, you attack the b5 pawn, b4, and then a5, and it's really hard for black to play this game. You really take away a lot of squares from this knight. It can't really go anywhere. After bishop e7 developing, you will castle and play the game, but white will just be much better. The bishop pair already very nicely eyeing that king side. White will just have a much better game. But that was also all very known at the time. So after this e4, c5 by Kramnik. This was still part of theory. Black cannot waste time. d5 by Kasparov. We have c4, forcing the bishop back, bishop to c2, and now queen to c7, developing the queen, and also leaving the option of castling kingside, but also both queenside. And here we have knight to d4. And what's interesting about this knight to d4 move Kasparov played is that, a lot of years after, 15 years after Kasparov played it, Magnus Carlsen also played it in the 2011 Biel Chess Festival against Alexei Shirov. And after Shirov went e5, Carlsen went knight f5, and Carlsen was able to win a very nice game. This 15 years before that game, Carlsen versus Shirov, Kramnik went knight to c5. And we have a completely different game. Well, obviously, as it was played 15 years before that game, but I'm sure both Carlsen and Shirov knew about this famous game between Kasparov and Kramnik in 1996. So e5 was supposed to serve as most likely as a surprise to Carlsen. But okay, getting back to this game, b4, Kasparov now forces things. We have c captures on b3 en passant, A captures and now b4, kicking this knight back, and this will result in this e4 pawn, well, being defenseless. By doing this, Kramnik basically wins the pawn. We have knight to a4, and now comes knight c captures on e4. So Kasparov decided to sacrifice this e4 pawn. We have bishop captures, knight captures, and now d captures on e6. So Kasparov grabs the pawn back, and it's very interesting. Can Kramnik take back the pawn? If you play f captures on e6, then you get knight captures, and then all hell breaks loose. Your queen is under attack, your bishop is under attack, you have to react to this. Queen e5, now comes knight captures on f8, rook captures, and here comes bishop to b2. Now the knight on the rim comes very handy as it protects the bishop on b2. The queen is under attack, queen has to move, now threatening all sorts of ideas if this knight moves, so h4. This is quite a forced line, and both Kasparov and Kramnik surely calculated it out. Queen captures, and now f3. Everything is now defended, the knight has to move, knight c3, bishop captures, b captures, and now knight to c5. And here, white will just be much better. The bishop is under attack, queen d7 is the threat of checkmate, you have to react to this, you have to go bishop c6, control d7 and get the bishop out of danger, but then queen d6, and it's very unlikely that black will be able to survive all this pressure. The rooks can now come into the game, and it's just not, black will not be able to defend all the threats. So after this, d captures on e6, Kramnik does not capture back, rather he plays bishop to d6, pressures the h2 pawn. Kasparov grabs the f7 pawn as well. We have e captures on f7 with check, queen captures, and here again it's a very delicate position. Kramnik's king is still in the center of the board, but Kramnik's pieces are also all eyeing Kasparov's king. So what do you play here? If you play something like bishop to e3, then black can castle. Now there's a lot of pressure against the f2 pawn. After f3, trying to kick the knight back, you get knight to c3. Knight captures, b captures, and here after queen to d3, black can go queen to h5. At some point, this queen to h5 will always come, and black will create threats against the h2 pawn. And now, let's say if f4, queen d5. Again, you pressure the g2 pawn, and however white continues playing this game, black will always be better. Black will always be able to find one more resource to be able to continue the attack. Let's say rook f3, rook 8 to e8 is coming, and you can see that black's position is just much more active. After white makes a move, you can go bishop captures on f4. This rook cannot move due to the threats of checkmate on g2. So after bishop captures, rook captures. Now your knight is threatened as well. After you move the knight, rook e2 is coming. Now rook g4 will be an idea, and everything will pile up against this g2 pawn. Seems like it would be too much pressure for white. So Kasparov plays the absolute best move. He plays f3. Immediately he forces Kramnik to decide what to do here. But one thing this f3 pawn does, it prevents the queen from keeping an eye on the h5 square. So instead of reacting to this, Kramnik simply goes queen to h5. And it is the precise idea. Now if Kasparov captures the knight, queen captures on h2 is deadly. King f2, you can castle with check, king has to move, and now you go queen captures on g2. The king will simply not be able to survive on e3. White doesn't have any good moves here. So after queen to h5, we have g3, now keeping an eye on that, and now Kramnik again has to make a decision. Kramnik already decided he will part with his knight, but will he do it in a way that he will allow Kasparov to capture it, or would he sacrifice on g3? There is the possibility of knight captures on g3. If h captures and only then castles, it's still a lot of pressure for Kasparov to handle. But after rook to a2, it seems a white defense. Let's say bishop captures here, but now rook can come to g2, and it seems a white successfully defended against everything, and Kramnik does not want to allow that. After g3, Kramnik decides to castle and allow Kasparov to capture on e4 if he wishes so. Kasparov does capture, it is the best move. We have f captures on e4, and now queen to h3. And this is now a very important moment in the game. Kasparov has to decide how to continue this game. If he can somehow survive this attack, he is up a piece. For now, his extra piece is this knight on a4, which isn't doing all that much. But if he can defend, get this knight into the game, then he will have an excellent game. Here, Kasparov played knight to f3, and he allowed Kramnik a bit too much. With queen to e2, he would prevent this bishop captures on g3 idea. One such line would be bishop captures on g3, and now white ignores black and goes knight f5. And here, everything just works out for white. Now you have to move the bishop. After bishop to e5, you can go bishop b2. Again, you can use this weird knight on a4 as a protector of the bishop on b2. After bishop captures, now knight captures. The knight also can come back into the game. Rook a d8, now queen to c4 check. And after king moves, knight goes back to g3. The knight now very nicely defends this pawn. Everything is connected. The rooks are connected, and white is able to play this game on. But Kasparov went for a different line. He went knight to f3, and now Kramnik's idea works out. He plays bishop captures on g3, and now again, if you play h captures on g3, it's just game over for Kasparov. Queen captures after king moves, and now comes bishop captures on e4. There's a triple attack against the knight on f3, and whatever you do, let's say you want to introduce another defender into the game, then simply rook captures, and it's all over. Rook captures, bishop captures, you have to give up the queen, captures, and after king moves, now you simply bring the other rook into the game. You can go rook e2 check, it's all over for white. So, after this bishop captures on g3, Kasparov went knight to c5. He wants to eliminate the bishop on b7, which is a pretty terrifying piece. But now, by doing this, he also says that I'm not worried about rook captures on f3. Rook captures on f3 removes the defender of the h2 pawn. So, if rook captures on f3, the queen is then allowed to capture back. So, Kramnik goes for this. We have rook captures, and now, again, Kasparov has to make a decision. Either he will capture or he will go rook to a2, which defends the h2 pawn once again. In the game, Kasparov captured, which was not the best course of action, but at least it's hoping for something. If you go rook a2, then Kramnik can simply trade down into a better endgame. For example, queen captures, you force a trade of queens, queen captures, rook captures, king captures, and now rook to c8, a very powerful move. If now captures, then you can capture on c5, and after bishop to e3, now you have bishop to f4. You get your bishop out of the way, and also after bishop captures, you will capture here, and you will have this endgame, an opposite colored bishop endgame, where Kramnik would be up a pawn, but with also a better position. So it's one way to do it, but Kasparov did not want to go into this with the white pieces, it would seem. So, after rook to f3, we have rook captures on f3. You have to capture with the rook, so as after the queen captures, you make room for the king on f1. Queen captures on h2 with check, king to f1, and now comes the move that perhaps Kasparov missed, otherwise he would have most likely gone into that opposite color bishop endgame where he is down a pawn, defending a worse position, but feel free to pause the video here and try to find how to continue this attack with black in a most precise fashion. I'll give you a couple of seconds, just so you get into the mood. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent player. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, the move Kasparov most likely missed is bishop to c6, preparing bishop to b5, and this check will be deadly. And there's not all that much you can do. If you decide to play something like rook a5 after bishop to b5 to give up the exchange, simply bishop to c7, attacking the rook. And now after white tries some sorcery with bishop to f4, with ideas of forcing black to capture back, then queen h1 check. King e2, now you can capture, queen captures, king captures, and only now will you eliminate this rook here. So this would be excellent for black. So here Kasparov tried bishop to g5. Kasparov's idea is that he wants to meet bishop to b5 check with knight to d3, and he doesn't want to allow this rook to come to d8. So bishop from g5 very nicely defends the d8 square. But okay, bishop to b5 check. Kramnik does play this. We have knight to d3. But now rook to e8, and it seems Kasparov doesn't have all that much to do here. Kasparov went rook to a2, hoping for queen captures rook, so the rook can at least eliminate one of the attackers. But here Kramnik just ignored him. Kramnik, well, here comes the only bad part of this game, in my opinion. Here Kramnik has a forced checkmate in 4 moves, but the problem is Kramnik found a different win, so he stopped looking for a faster one. But you are, comfortable in your own home, I presume, so feel free to pause the video here and try to find the forced checkmate in 4 Vladimir missed here. I'll give you a couple of seconds, as usual. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You are an excellent, seeker of checkmates. But for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, bishop captures on d3 with check. It's not very often that when you have to find the correct idea, it will start with check, but this is one such occasion. Now you are in check, you have to capture, we have rook captures on d3, and now comes queen to h1 check. It's similar to the idea Kramnik had in the game, but through a different move order. But now after king e2, you have queen to g2 check, king to e3, and now the queen very nicely controls the e4 pawn here, rook captures on e4 will be checkmate. Kramnik's idea was different. Kramnik first started with queen to h1 check, we have king to e2, and now... if you go queen to g2 check, the queen will no longer control the e4 square because the rook is on f3. You did not capture on d3 first. So now after king to e2, first the rook captures on e4 was played by Kramnik. We have king to d2 and only now queen to g2 with check. King c1 and now Kramnik wins the rook on a2. We have queen captures on a2, rook captures on g3 and now queen to a1 check. King to c2 and now queen to c3 check. We have king to b1, and here Kramnik just played rook to d4, attacking the pin piece, and it was in this position that Garry Kasparov resigned the game. Why did he resign? Well, your knight is attacked 3 times, there's no way to further defend it. If you try something like king a2, get out of any checks and hope to continue the game, it will not work. Simply bishop captures, and after, let's say, you try queen c1 to trade queens, rook d5. You will force white to trade, and after queen captures, you will play pawn captures, and now you have a very dangerous passed pawn here. Whatever white plays, let's say b4, you go c2, and then now, let's say bishop h6, you pressure the pawn here, but g6, and now after rook to g2, black will simply enjoy this. It's still an opposite color bishop endgame, but Kramnik would be up 3 pawns, and with the pass pawn on c2, it will not be possible for Kasparov to defend it. And also, this pawn will be very weak, as the king will have to be included in the defense, well, in stopping the passed c pawn. On the other hand, after rook to d4, you could try something like knight to c1, or for a queen trade, you capture my queen, I'll capture yours, but it doesn't work. If rook captures on c3, now b captures, king c2, yes, you will eliminate the passed pawn, but after rook to f1, king captures, now you're down the exchange, and also Kramnik is up 2 pawns, so again, a completely winning position for Kramnik. So yeah, after rook to d4, Kasparov resigned the game, and like I said, the only bad part about this game is that Kramnik didn't go for the forced mate in 4, he could have finished the game much sooner, but he found a different win, so it's just the same. Something that will happen very often. When you find a win, you no longer care if there's a faster win, I'm beating world champion Garry Kasparov here, I don't care how I beat him. And I also did prepare the final standings after the 1996 Dos Hermanas tournament. There you have it. As you can see, Kramnik won the tournament alongside Topalov with 6 out of 9. Then with 5.5 you have Anand and Kasparov tied, which means that if Kasparov didn't lose this game against Kramnik, meaning that either if he drew the game, then Kasparov would be tied with Topalov for first place, but if Kasparov won against Kramnik here with the white pieces, then Kasparov would be the sole leader of this tournament. So definitely an important game for both Kramnik and the final tournament standings. Then you have Illescas-Cordoba, the Spanish favorite player, Gata Kamsky, Boris Gelfand, Vassily Ivanchuk with 3.5 out of 9. Not the greatest tournament for good Chucky. Alexei Shirov with 3 out of 9, and Judit Polgar also with 3 out of 9. So an excellent victory for Kramnik, and also an excellent tournament victory for Vladimir Kramnik. So as you can see, today you will know Kramnik mostly as the, extremely precise positional player that, punishes every slight imprecision like a machine. But in the old days, before he became world champion, he would often have a game like this against none other than world chess champion Garry Kasparov. And also, I prepared something very exciting. Well, I hope it will be something very exciting. I prepared for you scores between Vladimir Kramnik and some of the world champions throughout his life. So here we have one such score between Vladimir Kramnik and Anatoly Karpov. As you can see, Kramnik and Karpov in classical games, so Kramnik won 2 games, Karpov won 2 games, and 10 draws. So out of the 14 games, they are tied in classical chess. Then we have Kramnik's score against Garry Kasparov. As you can see, in classical games, Vladimir Kramnik beat Garry Kasparov 5-4 with 40 draws. So, in classical chess, Kramnik has a positive score against Garry Kasparov. Just something to show you how strong Kramnik really was. Then we have Kramnik's score against his lifetime score against Vishwanathan Anand. As you can see, Vladimir Kramnik tied Vishwanathan Anand 11-11 with 71 draws. So many games between these two rivals, and in the end, it's a tie. Again, his lifetime score against another world champion. Then it wouldn't be much of a showing if we didn't show his lifetime score against none other than the reigning world champion Magnus Carlsen. Here it is, Kramnik's score against Magnus Carlsen. Carlsen beat Vladimir Kramnik 6-5 with 16 draws. So against a player that is considered to be he is considered to be the strongest player in history. Kramnik only loses by a 1-point margin, so 6-5 with 16 draws. And it wouldn't also be much of a showing if we didn't show Kramnik's score against none other than the great Chucky, not a world champion, but definitely a strong player, especially in those days. When he was just beating everyone. Everyone knows that Chucky can lose against a 2100 player, but on a good day, even AlphaZero would think twice before challenging Chucky. As you can see, Kramnik against Chucky, Vladimir Kramnik beat Vassily Ivanchuk 11-6 with 31 draws. So the only one out of these 5 extremely powerful players that has a positive score against Vladimir Kramnik is Magnus Carlsen, and only by a 1-point margin. So that's how good Vladimir Kramnik is. And like I said, although he retired from professional chess, he retired from playing. He will, of course, I believe he will be included in the chess world for the rest of his life. But we'll just have to wait and see. So that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it, and it's a bit too early to start a Kramnik saga, maybe in a few years, but we'll definitely get to that. I would also like to thank Kenneth Serda, Theo Drivas, Gregory Laird, Mick van der Drift, and Bojan Savicevic for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, hopefully with another interesting game. As usual, I hope. Thank you all, and I will see you soon.